Okay, now let's talk about rotations. It's the third of our transformations series, so make sure you have your notebooks out. There's going to be some notes to take. A rotation this time, instead of being a slide or a flip, is a turn. It can be turned different amounts or different degrees to make up different types of rotations. So let's see what a rotation looks like. Alright, I have my original image, or my pre-image rather, and this time I'm going to mark the point 0, 0, otherwise known as what? The origin, and I'm going to mark that as a center this time. Now when I select my entire shape, I'm going to go up to transform, and this time we're going to rotate. Now notice I have a box here with a number of degrees inside. I want to put in a negative 90 degrees right now. It doesn't really mean anything to us personally, but to Sketchpad, that means I'm going to go 90 degrees in a clockwise direction. So notice my shape is still identical. There is still what's called rigid motion, which means that my shape itself didn't change, just the position of it did. Notice how different it looks now. I'm going to very quickly measure my coordinates for my new image. Just a reminder, my original shape is called the pre-image. I'm going to move these up so that I can do some comparison. Okay, now let's compare A and A prime, pre-image to image. What do you notice about our numbers? First thing you should notice is that our numbers didn't exactly change all that much. However, they are in a different order, right? The 1 that used to be second is now first, and the 9 that used to be first is now second, with one other major change. My original 9 was negative, and in the second point it's second, but now it's also a positive. In other words, it changed sign. Did the same thing happen to my B and B prime? My original number, my original first value is now second and changed sign. My original second value is now first. Nothing else changed. Check for my next point. My original first number is now second and changed sign. Second value is now first. Nothing else happened. Same thing happened with D. First is now second, second is now first. And same thing happened with E and E prime. So this time we're going to write the arrow notation here in Sketchpad. So first of all, what changed? Let's just make sure before we do anything else that that's going to be the same case no matter where I move my original pre-image. Is that still the case? Is my first number still second with a sign change, and second value is now first? Is my first value now second with a sign change, and my second value still first with no sign change? Did the same thing happen for the rest of my 3 points? Answer is yes. So let's look. My first value in my pre-image points, right, pre-image coordinates, the x value is now second with a sign change. The second value, the y value in my pre-image, is now first with no sign change. Let's look at what that looks like in arrow notation. For all our points, right? For all the points in our pre-image, this is what it's going to look like. Our first value, our x value, is now second with a sign change, and our second value is now first with no sign change. Remember, this was a 90-degree clockwise rotation. I know this looks really confusing, but remember the second set of parentheses in arrow notation is only to show us how our point values changed. In other words, if I'm given, let's say, a point G that's at -7 and -5, I need to be able to find where G prime is, sometimes without drawing a graph. So this is telling me that my -7, or x value, I should write that second in my new point with a sign change. My negative now becomes a positive. And my second value, or y coordinate, right, now should be written as my first number with no sign change. If I have to draw this without using a graph or say where the coordinates are, I can say that G prime for sure is at -5, 7. Make sure that this gets written in your notes. Pause the video if you need to. Now let's look what happens. Again, I'm going to mark the origin as my center. That simply means that that point stays in place and my entire graph rotates around that point. Now when I pick my entire pre-image, we're going to rotate. This time, we're going to rotate it exactly 180 degrees. On a clock, that rotation would be going from like 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, or from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, right? That would be 180 degrees. Let's measure our new coordinates. A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, and E prime. Let's line these up. B prime next to B, C's, D's, and E's. Alright, let's take a look at our coordinates now. How did they change from pre-image to image, from A to A prime? Did they change order this time? No, let's look. Our first value, 9, -9, is still first, but with what change? A sign change. Our 1, that was our second value, is still second, but with what change? Another sign change. Let's see if that holds same for B and B prime. -9 to +9, from 7 to -7. Did not change order, but which ones changed sign? Both of them. How about from C to C prime? Still the same thing? Did not change order, but both changed sign? How about from D to D prime and from E to E prime? Let's move our original image and see if we can do the same thing no matter where it is on the graph. Is it the same? Same order, just both change sign? By the way, FYI, from 0 to 0 can still be a sign change because there's no such thing as -0. Check the rest of our points, make sure that the same rule holds. So let's write this in arrow notation. First of all, what changed? Did the order change this time? No. Which signs changed? Both. Both X and Y changed sign. So let's look at the arrow notation. All our points, X and Y, our first value still stayed first in the second set of parentheses, but with a sign change. Our second value still stayed second, but with a sign change. This is our arrow notation for a 180-degree rotation. And just so that we're clear, whether we go clockwise with 180 degrees or whether we go counterclockwise 180 degrees, I'm going to end up in the same place. So we don't need to worry about direction on a 180-degree rotation. Alright, and finally, we're going to do the same thing for our last sketch. Mark the origin as our center. I'm going to rotate, and this time I'm going to rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. This is the opposite direction that a clock goes. Let's move these so that we can see them together. Be watching to see what exactly changed from regular to prime, from pre-image to image. Let's look at our A's, A and A prime. What changed? My X value is now second. Was there a sign change? No. My Y value is now first. Is there a sign change? Yes. Let's move our image around and see if the same thing happened. Oop, it's off the screen. Here we go. Let's take a look. Is the same thing still happening? First value is now second with no sign change. Second value is now first with a sign change. Is the same thing happening for all 5 of my point pairs? So let's hurry and write down what changed. For all of our points, our first value is now second with no sign change. Second value is now first with a sign change. Here's our arrow notation for 90 degrees counterclockwise. So let's take a look at how that's going to affect us. Please make sure that all of these arrow notations are in your notes. So here I have a pre-image. Let's say that I want to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. A 90 degrees clockwise rotation. The arrow notation, if you recall, said that my first value is now second with a sign change. Second value is now first and stays the same. So if I look at where point A is at -3, 8. Point B, I didn't mean to put the prime on that point A. That's just regular point A. Point B is at -4, 3. And point C is at -9, 3. Where does that mean A prime is going to end up? Remember, it said to take your first value and put it second in your new point with a sign change. So -3 now becomes second and changes from negative to positive. My second value is now first with no sign change. B prime, -4 now goes second and becomes a +4. 3 is now my first value. And with C prime, -9 is now second and becomes positive. 3 is now first. So now A should be at 8, or A prime rather, sorry, should be at 8, 3. B prime should be at 3, 4. And C prime should be at 3, 9. Here, sorry about my unstraight lines, is our new triangle. That's our rotation 90 degrees clockwise. It's almost as if, remember, you put a pin through the origin so that it stayed in place, and you could turn your entire paper around, or if you could cut out this quadrant and turn it 90 degrees clockwise, that's where your new shape would end up, is right here. Let's try a 180 degree rotation. Remember, with 180 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise is going to be the same thing. So arrow notation, remember they stayed in the same order, just both changed sign. So again, point A was at -3, 8. Point B was at -4, 3. And point C was at -9, 3. That means A prime should be where? They stay in the same order, just both of them change signs. So -3, +8 becomes +3, -8. -4, +3 becomes +4, -3. And -9, +3 becomes +9, -3. A prime should be at 3, -8. B prime should be at 4, -3. And C prime should be at 9, -3. Here is my new, let's try that line again. Here is my new triangle. After a 180 degree rotation. And finally, let's do a 90 degree counterclockwise rotation. Arrow notation said now my second value is first with a sign change. My first value is second with no sign change. So again, A was at -3, 8. B is at -4, 3. C was at -9, 3. That means that A prime first value is now second with no sign change. Second value is first with a sign change. Again, -4, 3 becomes -3, -4. C prime Negative 9, 3 now becomes negative 3, negative 9. Negative 8, negative 3 is A prime. Negative 3, negative 4 becomes B prime. Negative 3, negative 9 becomes C prime. Here's my new triangle after a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation. Few things to remember. Watch for which triangle is the pre-image and which one's the image. Remember, pre-image is regular, image is prime. Sometimes you might want to pick a test point to check arrow notation, see if your arrow notation is correct. And the arrow notation will always be the same for every type of rotation. So a 90-degree clockwise rotation will always have the same arrow notation. A 180-degree rotation will always have the same arrow notation. And every 90-degree counterclockwise rotation will be the same in arrow notation. Remember to write down any questions so you can ask me in class. And your assignment for this topic is the rotations worksheet. Whew, good luck.